Today's episode takes us inside a space most of us rarely see but constantly consume, and that is the newsroom. What does it mean to report on the church while belonging to it? How does faith shape professional judgment in an age of digital outrage and instant commentary? And can journalism itself be a form of Catholic vocation? To help us think through these questions, I'm joined by John Grosso, digital editor at the National Catholic Reporter, and I'm just going to say NCR for short. His work lives at the intersection of Catholic life, media, and the fast-moving digital landscape, a place where truth, prudence, and charity don't always align neatly. And today we're not just talking about headlines, we're talking about conscience, identity, and what it means to pursue truth as both a journalist and as a Catholic. And John, welcome to Catholic Passage.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here, and always a privilege to get to do one of these.
Yeah, so John, first I want to introduce the audience to you. Like, who is John Grosso? Where are you from? Born and raised? Where did you go to school? I know you're a Boston College. You went to Boston College, I think, for undergraduate studies. And kind of what's your professional path been in the past, where it's at now, and that type of thing. So, but before we do that, I kind of want to just establish a little bit and talk about your faith life. Where did your Catholic faith begin? Was it in a family, school, parish? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So my faith life began, I think like a lot of millennials that are still here, with my mother. My mother taught me my sort of the rote prayers when I was 2 years old. She brags still to this day, I'm 33, that I knew how to say the Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory Be when I was 18 months old. I don't know how true that is, but it's definitely something that she likes to bring up in casual conversations, probably a little too often. She was the director of religious education at our parish, St. Leo's, in Connecticut. And so I was at church all the time, literally all the time. The school bus dropped me off at church, because that's where my mother was. And so I was an altar server. I was in the youth choir. I was, when I was confirmed, I was in a teacher's assistant in preschool classes and then in regular, at the time, CCD classes. So I was just heavily involved at the parish. It was part of my existence. We had a summer fair that still continues to this day. That was sort of a legendary moment in the life of our parish. And I just would live and die by sort of the liturgical seasons, but also whatever was happening at St. Leo's. And then my mother moved on to a different job. Still attended Mass weekly, of course, but about the time I went to college, I went to Boston College, and my mother built a beautiful foundation of faith in me, of an understanding of prayer, my prayer life. But the Jesuits at BC really took that faith and matured it in a very dramatic way. Not just in the sort of the deep care for social justice, which they certainly ingrained in me, but in the care of vocation, the understanding of what one's vocation is, what your place is in the world, how God is moving through you, what God has bestowed upon you in terms of your gifts and discernment. And those sort of two principles really have animated my faith life ever since.
So where is St. Leo's in Connecticut?
Stamford, Connecticut. It was basically right across the street from my, at one point, elementary school and high school. So, it was really the nexus of my life.
And so what other colleges were you looking at going to? Was it just Boston College or bust, or were there other colleges?
Oh man, I applied to like 13 or 14 colleges. I was so terrified of making that step of going to school that I just sort of cast the net really wide. I had some Catholic schools in there, but I wasn't specifically searching for one. And I got into, I think of the 14, I think I got into 9 schools, and my mother and father did their diligence. I think I toured every single one of them to sort of excruciating degree. And it was this rainy April. My parents had driven through the night from our trip to Walt Disney World. I'm the oldest of 4, so it was an April break, was my senior year. We were at Disney. We left a day early, drove all the way to Boston from Orlando. And so we were all sleep deprived. Everyone, again, oldest of 4, everyone was snipping at each other. It was a lot of time to be in a minivan. It was pouring rain. And I went up those, they're called the $1 Million stairs. But there are these a ridiculous set of stairs on the hillside there, which is sort of the cliff of an old reservoir. And I just I kind of looked around, and every school I had toured before, no, just didn't, no effect on me. Couldn't picture myself there. But I felt at peace here. And as sort of I crested the top of the stairs, I heard here very loudly, very strongly. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to argue with that.
So did you go to study journalism at Boston College, or like mass comm, or what did you study?
It's been sort of a circuitous route for me here to get to NCR. I tell everybody, and I hope your listeners don't find this to be irreverent. I mean it very reverently, that I studied Jesus and politics. That I went to school for political science. It was my great love was politics, governmental work. I had internships in campaigns and at every level of government, local, which is probably where my true love lies, as local government, state and federal. And I figured, what better to keep me grounded than a deep dive in theology? So that's what I did. And so fully planned to graduate BC, get a job on a kind of campaign, obviously because I was full of hubris, win that campaign, get into government work, and the theology would keep me grounded, and hopefully we could do some good in the world. Graduated school, started on a campaign, was asked to do something that, while I will not say was illegal, was flagrantly immoral, and thought, this is not for me. So I stuck it out for a couple more weeks on the campaign just to pay some bills and student loans, and then resigned kind of listlessly with no plan, and applied for hundreds of jobs across multiple sectors until a very wise person in my life finally pulled me aside and was like, you need to figure out what you actually want and go get that, instead of just sort of trying to take something that will pay you so your student loans don't come calling. And that day I saw a job opening from the Diocese of Bridgeport, which is in Connecticut, was my home diocese. And they were looking for a social media leader. And I thought, I've done social media communications in every internship and every job I've ever done. Maybe that's actually what God wants me to do. So I applied and got it.
And so forgive me, what is a digital editor?
Well, that's a good question. So at NCR, it's sort of a job title that I helped create. After my work at the Diocese of Bridgeport, I was there for 8 years, through engagement, marriage, the pregnancy of my first daughter, my wife's pregnancy, and then moved with a brief stopover at an organization called Foundations, or called Fatica, which is basically a conglomerate of foundations interested in Catholic activities. And then was doing a social media audit for National Catholic Reporter. I was asked by one of our previous editors to do that, and did the audit, and then sort of the extra mile created the position of digital editor, which essentially at NCR is responsible for things that touch the internet. So in a way that I think connects to the rest of the editorial structure of the paper. So we have an opinions editor, we have a culture and spirituality editor, we have a news editor. So I thought, well, why don't we have someone that focuses entirely on digital media, that can say, okay, here's what we see is working analytically, here's what we see is not working. And sometimes, sometimes you don't care about that because the news is the news and you have to deliver it. But sometimes you can see a need, or perhaps an opportunity, a growth opportunity. And then how do we translate that into actual content? And then how do we create really good content for people on social media that is an end to it, an end in and of itself. It's not just something that's supposed to drive people to the website or to an email list or to get them mad about something, but that exists to, in some way, inform them or form them. And so I had pitched that to the team, and they kind of said, go for it. And we've just sort of made it. It's now been 3 years. We've sort of made it my own with the help of my coworkers.
So here's one of the questions that popped up when I was preparing for the interview today. And I'm like, I shouldn't ask that because maybe he'll take it the wrong way, or the listening audience might. But I want to ask it because I think it's what naturally comes to my mind when I think about somebody that's Catholic and a reporter, but you're a little different than that because you're Catholic and a reporter for a Catholic organization, right? And so is there a difference between reporting on the church and reporting as a Catholic? Do you understand like the distinction I'm asking?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really, really good question. And I think this is where sort of those concepts of discernment and vocation that the Jesuits instilled in me. I think I was placed at BC, and I think I learned what I learned for for such a time as this. At NCR, we are. I think people probably forget this, but we are all deeply, deeply devoted Catholics. We care very much about our church. We care very much about those on the margins. Um, you know, there is, a, I think people would be surprised at just how profoundly devout my coworkers and I are. And so it's hard to toe that line, right? First and foremost, I'm a Catholic. You asked me kind of at the top of this is who are you? The very first thing I am is a Catholic, and very close second is I'm a husband and a father. And then after that is sort of I am a reporter. And that's sort of the unique part of working for sort of a Catholic institution that specializes in Catholic news is at the end of the day, we are Catholic, and we love our faith and we love our church. And I think animated by that love, we want the church to be its very best self. And so I'm speaking for the news part here, not sort of the columns and opinions. Everybody has one, but the news aspect of it, sort of shedding light on perhaps maybe difficult situations within the life of the church, which we've had many, or shedding light on the ways that the church is falling short or the shortcomings of the organization. That's not done in a way, truly, that is not done in a way that is a getcha moment to denigrate the church in any way. It is because at the end of the day, we're Catholics. We want to see the church be her best self. We think in exposing some of these challenges, we could remedy them, or else they fester.
Well, and that's kind of what I was getting at. Is there a tension between being objective and being faithful?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I think so. I think at the end of the day, everybody has to do kind of sort of that internal discernment, in themselves as sort of where is the line? God will help me find it. I think there's a tension. I do think, again, the way I reconcile it is that I am being faithful if I am pursuing an avenue that helps the church be its best self, even if that avenue involves short-term pain or perhaps struggle. That if at the end of the day that pain, suffering leads to sort of the resurrection of Easter, if Good Friday leads to Easter, then it's worth it. And then whether or not that outcome is going to happen, that's needs to be a prayerful and discerning kind of experience.
You talked a little bit about Catholic social teaching. I know John Carr. I don't know if you're familiar with John Carr, but
yeah, he's a friend.
Is he? Yeah. St. Thomas. I'm a St. Thomas alum, and I went to St. John Vianney College Seminary, which John Carr went to, and then also developed a friendship with his daughter, Kelly,
wow.
who went to St. Thomas, and Kelly and I became pretty close. In fact, she came to my house in Okoboji, Iowa, and visited with some friends, and have remained good friends since. But do you think Catholic social teaching shapes the way you think about storytelling?
Definitely it does. I think it animates a lot of what NCR's mission and ethos are. I mean, at the end of the day, we are in sort of an independent lay-run news organization that wants to elevate voices of the faithful that are on the margins, and oftentimes, or not oftentimes, I think all the time that generally means sort of being consumed by or of the ethos of Catholic social teaching. So yeah, I think we're animated by that because that's why we want to elevate those voices on the margins. What continues to motivate a lot of our opinion pieces, the editorials when we feel like it's time to kind of speak prophetically. It's all animated by, that deep care for those on the margins, the poor, the sick, the least of us, because that's who Jesus told us to care for. And
related to your job is like the social media digital and the social justice, like people on the margins. I say this cautiously because I understand that like social media means a lot of different things. But generally, I think it's true, and you may disagree. Go ahead, disagree if you disagree. But I do think that social media generally rewards outrage. And that's where it seems to thrive the most. in my experience. People go to the comments section before sometimes they go to the content. You know what I'm talking about, right? Clicks. And that's what fuels social media is clicks. And but the gospel calls for charity, right? All right. So how do you navigate those two things? Like understanding what social media can be in its worst forms, maybe, and what the gospel requires. How do you kind of hold those two things as the digital editor, so to speak? I think that would be an interesting task.
Oh man, we could be here a while talking about that. It's an interesting task. It's a hard task. It's one that sometimes I pray passes from me because it's a cup that I don't always enjoy drinking from. Social media I'm not going to sit here and be Pollyanna. Social media is a cesspool. It has been for quite some time. I really, there was this time in sort of the early adaptation of social media when the church was just starting on it, when Pope Francis came to the United States in 2015, where it was there was still some challenges lurking, but there was this sort of Pollyanna, everything is wonderful. Look at this wonderful new tool we get to use for the glory of God. And then things shifted in a pretty dramatic way. And sort of we're left here in 2026 with platforms that everybody uses pretty obsessively, but also very reluctantly. And that I think get worse by the day. We all saw the TikTok scandal earlier this year where they were muting opposition to one particular person. The algorithms on X and Meta products like Facebook and Instagram have been repeatedly called out, analyzed for their bias, their confirmation bias, and their sort of thought, the little bubbles that they produce of like-minded communities that can't accept any disagreement. So it's a real challenge. And so I think the very first thing for anybody that operates in this world is just acknowledging that this is a challenge, that this is the world we are in, because to sort of pretend like everything is fine and that these platforms are neutral, that's folly. That's not going to get us where we need to go. So for me, the tension lies in the platforms are cesspools. And what are the options in front of us? Well, we can run away. We can say, okay, as Catholics, we just don't want to participate in these at all. That they're not for us. Leave them to the rest of the world, the rest of the country, other faiths to sort of duke it out. And there's a lot of people that feel that way, that, nope, this is not for me. I got to get out. Or we can minister and we can treat social media as the margins. And that's kind of that's my approach. I assume that anybody that I'm speaking to on social media is in that sort of group that Catholic social teaching wants me to care about, for lack of a better phrase. That the people here, assuming they're not a bot, because as we can discuss that another time, there's a lot of bot traffic online, and with AI, it's getting worse. But assuming that the person behind the screen is a real person, they're a real person, even if they say some of the most negative, horrible stuff to me, and they do, especially when I write columns, I get really just lambasted. And NCR gets just tons and tons and tons of just the most heinous vitriol you'll ever see. Even when we get that, if it is coming from a real person, that real person is on the other end of the computer and has real sufferings, real day-to-day life challenges, could be going through something deeply profound, could be stressed, could be, having a reaction to medication, could be up in the middle of the night, could be dealing with the worst or best news they've ever gotten. They're a complex human that, kind of much like when they get behind the wheel of the car and there are no rules, is entranced by this algorithmic hellscape. So it's treating that person in charity and love. Sometimes that charity and love is calling that person out and saying, you are behaving really badly. This is not good for you. It's not good for your soul. And you probably want to stop. Sometimes it's treating that person with, you know what, I can't even dignify this with a response. You will probably recognize in the morning or whenever you come to your senses that what you wrote here is not appropriate. Or it's meeting that person and saying, you know what, there's legitimate criticisms here to something that I wrote. It needs to stand here. People need to see that there's kind of a yin and a yang of a push and a pull here. And it's just this exhausting, constant discernment. I don't always get it right. I don't think anybody does. But that's the way I approach it, is sort of navigating this, is just trying to make the space a little bit better while everyone else is trying to make it a little bit worse. And again, I fail miserably sometimes. You know, you get irritated by someone and you want to just go off on them in the comments. And sometimes, you know, when you're on a site that's really anonymous, like a Reddit or, you know, people create all these burner X accounts, you know, you can really kind of let your unbridled thoughts out, but that's not good for your soul. So that's kind of what I try to constantly remind myself. It's hard.
Yeah, and I think that the thing I would caution against is there's some within the church that are like, I've seen what's going on with social media, and as you said, kind of sometimes the vitriol that's there. So therefore, digital bad, right? And I think that's a mistake too, because the digital is where the next generation's at, whether we like it or not. I mean, no offense, but most 18-year-olds aren't reading First Things.
No, they're not. And a lot of them aren't necessarily reading MSNBC, CNN, NCR, either one, and the Reporter or the Register. We are building our young reader base, but you know, we're doing that through social media. I mean, we've doubled our Instagram followers the last 18 months, and that's because that's where the young people are. I agree with you. Digital is not. I think digital, people want to blame the medium. It'd be like blaming the MRI machine for a cancer diagnosis. Digital media is revealing some of our worst impulses. It's a mirror to who we are right now, to what our society is. And we're sick and we need medicine. And, you know, my reaction is not to co-sign, you know, that sickness to death. That's not what the Catholic response is. That is to engage to the extent that we're able to bring new life.
Well, and that segues great into my next conversation, which is you wrote an article, or I think it was an article. I don't know what you want to call it now that it's in the digital world, but the title is 4 Ways to Bring Parish Ministry to the Digital World. And it kind of talks about best practices that'll help build a parish community, both online and in person. And the reason I like the article so much, in part because I think it really spoke to those areas that have a reduction in vocations to the priesthood, that are dealing with parish ministry, the rural nature of parish ministry, and yet how do we still create ministries within that rural environment that feed the souls, that bring the flock to Christ, right? And I think the digital realm can have a huge role to play in that. Not just with AI, but you've already seen that. Apps like Hallow and different other things, Exodus 90 and all these different things, right? We're seeing our faith tapped into that. Catholic Passage is utilizing it. This very podcast is doing that, right? So talk a little bit about that article. I know it was published, if I recall, kind of in the heyday of COVID, wasn't it? When you put that out. But I think even taking COVID out of it, I think it's a great article that deals kind of with ways that parishes can flourish by using the digital tools at its disposal. And now even more, that was kind of pre-AI. I mean, now you may even have like insight as to like how AI has accelerated that. But could you speak on that a little bit?
Definitely. Yeah. So definitely that article came out summer 2021. And so it was, I think, you know, my age bracket then was just completing their vaccination. So my wife and I had gotten vaccinated a little bit before that because we're both in a high risk group. But it was a reaction to not necessarily to COVID, but into the reality of people were done with the pandemic. And look, I get it; it was terrible. I have many medical professionals in my life that had to deal with just some of the worst, most horrifying things I've ever experienced, or I've ever heard anyone experience. But people were done with the pandemic and wanted life to go back to normal. And then from my sort of socioeconomic cultural context here in Connecticut, even my job, people were like, okay, we're done. That's done. That was terrible. Let's never think about it again. Let's never do it again. I don't want to learn any lessons from it. I want life to begin, pick back up February 2020. You know, that's where I want, as if nothing has ever happened. Again, a totally reasonable impulse, but one that was just incompatible with the lived reality of what our life was going to be post-pandemic. The pandemic upended everything. There was no way from when it was written, whatever, summer 2021, to get back to winter 2020. That life had fundamentally shifted and changed. And I mean that very highly specifically to digital media, is what I saw during the pandemic in Connecticut in particular, but across the country, was this rush to catch up to adopting digital practices. I had many, many, many organizations contact me trying to figure out how to build a website, parishes and schools, a website in 2020. A Facebook page, a group of, people were jumping onto these platforms and these mediums because there was nothing else. People were trying to do Facebook for the first time, because of Facebook Live and YouTube Live had all those restrictions. And so there was this rapid, adoption of social media. And I think people then kind of encountered, ooh, this is not so fun. This is a lot of work and there's a lot of vitriol here. And so when that was done, I experienced, especially in my diocese, there was from every level of administration sort of a washing of our hands of it of, okay, that was neat. I don't care that we pulled in thousands of people. I'm done. I want everyone back in church. I want them there right now. I don't care if they're not comfortable with it. They're coming right now. I want them back in church the way it used to be. And again, the ground shifted here where I am. There was an influx of people from New York City. So there was entirely different communities here with entirely different needs. There was a brief boom and then bust of Catholic schools here. So there was, everything was fundamentally different. There were people that had fallen in love with priests preaching homilies or the music of various live streams of masses they've watched and were now traveling 2 hours for mass, which it's not a big deal as I understand it where you are. But in Connecticut, in my town alone, there's like 12 churches. I could walk to right now. It's an embarrassment of riches, and there's a lot of other problems we can talk about another time. But there was this realignment that happened. And so I wrote this piece because in this realignment, I was seeing that there were people that were getting lost in the shuffle pretty dramatically. And that though we wanted, and of course we're a sacramental church, it involves the physicality of, the literal physicality of grace. But there were homebound people. There were people that were still a little bit anxious about the pandemic. There were people that had long COVID. There were people, that from abroad that still had hard restrictions that were watching masses that could no longer, participate because our parishes and schools and entities were pulling the plug on these digital media outlets. And so I basically wrote this article to say, hey, I understand that it's hard. I understand that the impulse here is no more live stream masses, no more live stream Bible chats or Bible studies. We're done with all this. Come here. I get it. But that's not our reality anymore. We need to have inclusivity demands that we build a structure that it can be used by everyone. And there are going to be people that can only ever connect with us digitally. So the article was basically like, here's how to do this in a way that won't overburden your very overburdened and underfunded parish staff.
Yeah. Oh, that's in 2021, where were you? Were you with NCR?
I was with the Diocese of Bridgeport then.
People just knew hey, this guy from Bridgeport you need to call to figure some of this out?
I was really blessed. I'm blessed with great mentors and great people that sort of paved the way with speaking engagements or writing opportunities. A dear friend of mine who I met at a Catholic media conference, Stephanie Clary, was at US Catholic at the time, and then had me writing some pieces and was like, I don't know, you're doing something for the Vatican now. Can you write? We are getting just blown away by questions, about this topic. Can you write something? So yeah, at that point too, I was also working with the Vatican's Dicastery for Communications on their Faith Communication in the Digital World cohort, and I had just returned from my first and now only trip to Rome, working on with 15 other communicators from around the world on this sort of workshopping this question. And from that workshop, all that work together, there was various projects that emerged from that. But one of them was the drafting of the document Towards Full Presence, which the Vatican Dicastery for Communications published about sort of what faith communication looks like in the digital world. And we had a hand in that. And so I think probably by then I had the smoke and mirrors of my expertise were robust enough that I was able to get this article out there.
So I see a lot of parallels. I know this sounds weird, but I do. I see a lot of parallels between my vocation in the professional world as a judge and what you do as a journalist. Let me explain. One of the questions I get the most relating to my faith and its intersection with my work, both from Catholics and non-Catholics alike, has been something to the effect of Sophie's Choice. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is, like, regardless of what issue may come before you, Judge Sandy, if you ever felt that, like, having to decide that issue would run in contravention of your Catholic faith, your conscience, like, what would you do, right? I've formulated my own answer to that and kind of have thought through that and been able to articulate that. And I've thought about that for years. In fact, I remember Justice Clarence Thomas came to the law school at St. Thomas and spoke. And I didn't ask the question, but I was thinking it. Somebody else asked the question, and I kind of remember his response. It was a little bit glib, but for the most part, he kind of dealt with it, and I'll remember his answer. But I kind of want to pose a similar question to you. And some of it might be unfair, but part of it is me pushing off my PTSD on you, because it's kind of like, well, if I had to answer the question as a judge, I see the same parallels as a reporter, frankly.
No, absolutely.
And
no,
by the way,
I think it's worth it. I deserve it. Lay it on me.
Yeah, and by the way, because I didn't really start the podcast with this, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think I need to say it. Thank you for what you do, not just as a Catholic journalist, but a journalist, just period. A reporter. I've long said, in fact, I was at a Federalist Society event last year, and I don't think it was the answer anybody expected me to give, but it's the one I gave. The question was, which amendment do you think is the most important? Right?
What did you say?
I said free press.
Wow. Thank you.
And
We'll take
everybody
that.
was like shocked because they thought I'd talk about, I don't know. Well, I'm a former trial attorney. So I think they think that Fourth and Fifth Amendment, right, due process rights and these types of things, the 14th Amendment, for obvious reasons, right? But I actually said the free press. And the reason I say that is all the other rights that we have in a democracy, at least in my mind, relate back. It's like the infinite regress theory for the Bill of Rights. It relates back, in my mind, to knowledge.
Yeah.
I
think you're right.
Like constitutional amendments, knowledge, voting, knowledge, jury selection, not like jury deliberation, knowledge. It's all knowledge based. People talk about the Second Amendment and how we have the right to bear arms to revolt against the government. You only need to revolt against the government if you know what the government's doing.
Ha! That's a very good point. I might use that.
It's all knowledge based.
Yeah, you're right.
It is all knowledge based. And if the citizenry is not informed, if they are not educated, if they don't know what their government's doing or what the pulse of America is more generally, I always say, if you don't like an opinion I write, I'm just following the law. But the answer is to change the hearts and minds of your fellow citizens.
No, you're right.
But part of that medium requires the press. It's like when Cabrini, remember when, this is why I love the movie Cabrini. Remember when Mother Cabrini, who did she always go to when the injustices were about to crush her, where she had nowhere to turn? The New York press.
Yep.
She went to
Why
the
they all love her still in New York.
She went to the newspapers.
She sure did.
She didn't go to
She's
the
an absolute
Pope.
titan.
She went to the newspapers.
Yep.
And I really do think that the court of public opinion is driven by the press. And I think that it's the bedrock, I think, of our constitutional democracy. So
definitely. Well, I appreciate that very much.
That's
thank
my
you.
way of saying thank you. I think your job and the job of the press, as much as it's much maligned, is probably the most, in my opinion, if it's done right, and there's a debate as to that, and that's fine. But that kind of segues into this question, right? Which is this. if there was a story that would factually be true, but risks weakening the Catholics' trust in the church, do you still feel morally obligated to publish it?
Oh, that is a great question. Now, normally I would balk at hypotheticals. Now, I will say that scenario has not presented itself to me right now. In my 3 years here, that scenario has not presented itself to me. I will say in my career, when faced with the choice of doing something that I believed was either immoral or illegal, or keeping my job, or doing the task my boss had instructed me, I have at this moment, thank goodness, a 100% success rate of picking my faith. I wish I could say I was, Dudley Do Right and absolutely perfect in every other part of my life, but when it comes down to my career, I'm there. And then, of course, from a very personal standpoint, there's absolutely nothing I want to do in any part of my life that would cause me to be separated in the afterlife from my daughters and my wife. So I am pretty strongly, resolutely motivated in sort of my foundational moral teachings. Now, to get to your question, because I'm not that person. You asked it, I'm going to answer it.
You don't have to, by the way. You can plead the
No.
fifth. Not to use legal jargon.
No, I know. No, I'm not going to plead the fifth here. I am going to answer that. It would be so with the caveat of it would be highly, highly dependent upon the situation, of course. I probably would agonize over it, but at the end of the day, yes, I would publish it. And here's why. My bishop, when I worked at the Diocese of Bridgeport, Bishop Frank, who was a mentor and a friend, when sort of the 2018 renewed crisis in sexual abuse emerged after the Philadelphia grand jury or the Pennsylvania grand jury report and Cardinal McCarrick, we kicked off what I believe was the crowning achievement of my career, which was an episode of radical transparency. We brought in a judge, a retired judge, who came in and did a full-scale audit of all of our files, absolutely everything. We did our massive reparation. We had meeting after meeting with groups of survivors of sexual abuse. We did this, and people were furious at us because part of the full transparency was exposing some of the challenges that other bishops and clergy had gone through in reporting or not reporting what had happened. And they kept, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? It's going to hurt the church. It's going to hurt the church. And Bishop Frank would always say, when I was a young kid and I got a deep, deep wound and went to the hospital and I was screaming my head off and in the worst pain I've ever been in my life, the doctor was holding me down and said to my mother, I know this is bad, but I have to clean this wound or he will not get better. And so I would probably do so shaped by that experience in my career, is that as hard as this is, if it weakens the institutional church, so be it. If we have to clean this wound so that it will get better. Now, I would also probably say, from where I would sit, I would advocate for opinion columns from some respected theologians and individuals and opiners that we have to contextualize some of that news, to help assuage some of the concerns of the faithful, to help the faithful process it in a meaningful way that helps them endure in their faith journey. I would make that a very distinct priority. But yeah, I would publish it.
No, I think that's the right answer, though.
Did I pass, Your Honor? That's good.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is another way of asking that same question, I think, is, like something like, would you kill a story that was true? Not because it was not accurate, because it was accurate, but because you discern somehow it wouldn't serve the church. And so a few things with that. I think the truth always serves the church.
Agreed.
Right? I mean, if we're being honest, like that's the whole Socratic method, right? Like,
yeah,
the truth always serves the church. And really reporting and being honest and being transparent, I'm not saying you have to do it disrespectfully. As you said, there's context matters, how you report matters. But when I think of times when the church hasn't been fully transparent and honest, I have notions of Dante's Inferno, where he talks about like Boniface VIII lining the walls of hell, right? Like, I mean, I do
What
think,
an image, by the way.
yeah, right? Like, I do think there's this notion that, like, the truth and an honest dialogue about what we're currently encountering with church and culture, not being honest and forthright about that, I think is how we ended up where we ended up.
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed.
So, I mean, I think that there's something, as you said, healing
Yeah.
about being honest about what's going on and why, and being proactive. And here's the other thing: if you're not openly and honestly talking about it, you're like 20 steps removed from dealing with it.
100%.
Like,
Yep.
it's like when, like, we have to have a family meeting to talk about why little Johnny needs to go to rehab, and like no one's like, rehab for what? You know,
Yeah,
like,
no, you're
I
right.
mean, so I just think that I think you answered it correctly. But I do think that how you report on it matters. I mean, because we've all seen those news media outlets that almost like revel in the church's problems, right?
Yes.
And it's kind of like,
Yes.
well, I don't, whatever. But there's a difference between being truthful and being vicious too.
I totally agree. And fair, right? So I mean, we in my previous life at the diocese, we would encounter those sort of news media outlets. We were radically transparent with them. We would call them and say, "Hey, we have an incident we would like to report," and that was the mandate from the bishop: was radical transparency, open it up. But we would also find that there would be scandals at a university or at a public school or something like that nobody would really care about because it wasn't the Catholic Church. And so that's the other part of the story here is that I do think there are sometimes organizations that know that, number one, the Catholic Church is going to get clicks, and number two, that sometimes there is the scandal is real, the challenges are real, we must address them in the way we are addressing them, but also the press sometimes, never our organization, but there are some people that take some glee in the Catholic Church being down.
All right, to wrap up, I got a few questions. They're just kind of like hot potato questions.
All right, rapid fire. Let's do it.
Sort of rapid fire. I'm going to end it with rapid fire. Number one, what saint do you think would make a great journalist?
Oh man, I think John the 23rd, because even as Pope, I just think he would tell it like it is. Be very blunt.
All right. If you could give one piece of advice to young Catholics entering media, what would it be?
Discernment. Learn discernment and be comfortable in who you are, and be comfortable in your faith. I think that's the number one thing, is not try to get the good scoop, the big story. It's learn who you are, what animates you, what you want your beat to be, and what God is specifically calling from you in this ministry. Because it is if you're a Catholic and you're a journalist, it's your vocation. So how is God trying to glorify God's self through what you do?
Final question. Finish the sentence. To be Catholic in the newsroom means
loving Jesus through those on the margins and those who are difficult in our human experience to love.
Love that. That's a very John Carr-esque answer.
John's the best.
Oh, he's a man
We
among
could have a
men.
whole episode talking about how wonderful he is.
Yeah. I didn't realize how short he was till I had had a chance to be with him a few months ago for a St. Thomas event in the Twin Cities. And so it was funny because St. Thomas is doing great things. And one of the great things they're doing is they moved to Division I athletics. One might think, what does Division I athletics have to do with like a Catholic institution otherwise, right? And a lot of things. I mean, I think that for better or worse, culture is kind of in the athletic world right now.
Oh, yeah.
And so moving to Division I think, has opened up a conversation about St. Thomas that maybe hasn't occurred outside the breadbasket of America. And I think that exposure through moving to Division I is vital to the future progression of St. Thomas, moving onward and upward, so to speak. But one of the things, not to betray John's confidences, but I could tell, we were seeing this beautiful new arena, athletic complex, and
I bet.
you could just see John like squirreling, like, I know what he was thinking, like, how's this helping the poor, or he always has a mind to those on the margins, right? And
Absolutely.
that's why I love him. That's why the church loves him. That's why the church, I think, is going to miss his work.
Very much.
But yeah, he's a great guy. So, and funny.
Oh, he's hysterical. Oh, yes, yes. Well, so you didn't realize how short he was, and you can't tell on Zoom. I'm 6'3", so basically when I went to my very first initiative gathering, he kind of looked up and was like, this is not what I expected.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Well, John, thank you for being gracious and sitting for the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. Again, for the listeners, you can check John out at National Catholic Reporter. You can check us out at Catholic Passage. And John, again, thank you for being so good with your time. I know you're really busy, and it's President's Day, so I don't know if your kids are in school. Mine aren't. But it's I know that you made some time and sacrifices to be here, so I appreciate it.
Oh, it was a pleasure to be with you. God bless you, your work, and your listeners.